20 years before Marvel created a connected universe, DC gave it a try. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Supergirl. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and allow me to summon my co-host. Power of pop culture takes shape. Look like a podcast star. Seek out the trivia and insight, and review Supergirl wherever she are. It's Nicholas Pepin. How are you, Nicholas?
Well, I've been studying some sixth-dimensional geometry because I know that,
Yes.
you're on the side, you're a math teacher, so figured I needed to bone up and be ready for this to discuss this movie.
Yeah, although I hated they don't show the problem that she solves. Like, he points off screen. He goes, what was the answer to the problem? And she gives the answer of 5 million, whatever it was. And then I love how he solves it using like a little finance calculator with the ticker tape that comes out.
I mean, I feel like they didn't show it because the whatever crazy math that they were trying to use wasn't real anyway. So
yeah, she probably just made up the number right there on the spot. Like, it probably wasn't even a scripted number.
Probably. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of things that happened in this movie they just made up on the spot.
Well, we will definitely get into some of that. But yeah, we for those of you who've never paid attention to this, I have purposely been doing the Superman movies in order. So, of course, the very first episode of this podcast was the first Superman. Then I later did Superman 2 with Tim Williams, who had also done the first one with me. He and I also did Superman 3. And this movie actually comes after Superman 3 in timeline. So we are going to hit Supergirl, and then that means Superman 4, Quest for Peace, is coming at maybe in a year. Because I started doing these more, having them right around here, right around my birthday. So, yeah.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah. Then we get like Superman Returns and Man of Steel. And it's not like they get better. But I love Superman. So, and I do have a fondness for this movie, as you'll probably hear as we talk. But let's go ahead and get into it. So, Supergirl was released November 21st of 1984. So this is a whole 6 years after Superman the movie. And of course, it is following on the flop that was Superman 3. And it is intended to be a spinoff. I mean, Christopher Reeve, there is a poster, although Christopher Reeve was supposed to be in the movie, but decided not to do it. I don't know if that was a good decision or not, because apparently they had to drastically change the story after he bowed out.
Yeah, I don't know. There is this Mandela effect in my head of a deleted scene of him with Helen Slater. Or maybe she was a deleted scene in one of the other Superman movies. I don't know. Or I've just made it up entirely.
Or you're just thinking of that really bad CGI shot from The Flash from a few months ago.
I try not to think about that movie as often as possible, so.
I don't know of any footage of actual Helen Slater and Christopher Reeve together. But yeah, apparently the original storyline had Superman getting into trouble and Supergirl had to rescue him. And, you go back to the Superman 3 episode, there was originally a script that involved Supergirl, but I don't know if you're aware of this, Nicholas, but there was apparently a weird love triangle between Supergirl, Superman, and Brainiac was in the original script there for Superman 3.
So somebody who clearly didn't pay attention to who Supergirl is.
Yeah. And the thing is that even though Superman 3 was a flop and directed by Richard Lester, who also had directed Superman 2 after they let Donner go, they offered him this movie, and he also turned it down.
I don't know if that says something about his ability or what this movie is.
Yeah. I don't know. They also offered the directing job to Robert Wise, another well-known Hollywood figure there. He also declined. And so it went to, and I do not know how to pronounce his name. Janot Zawark is how I'm going to pronounce it. Who was off the heels of directing Jaws 2 and Somewhere in Time, as well as Santa Claus the movie, which Tim and I have actually covered for the 80s Flick Flashback.
I did notice that as I was going over his IMDb. I'm like, oh, this is not the first time he's been covered by Laramy.
Yep. And you know what? I'm a fan of Somewhere in Time, and apparently that was one of the things that helped him get this job. Was Christopher Reeve had positive things to say about him as a director.
So that's not why Christopher Reeve chose not to do this movie. It wasn't like I'm not
from
doing,
what I gathered. No,
I'm not doing it. Whoa! I just did a movie with that guy. I'm out.
No, I think it was more of Christopher Reeve not wanting to tank himself as Superman, but they needed Quest for Peace, so don't know. I did find it interesting, though, that Mr. Schwark, again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, actually directed the 200th episode of Smallville. So he stayed attached to the Superman franchise.
There's a very little TV shows that he didn't direct.
I did see that when I was looking up his filmography. He has directed a lot of TV.
I've seen a lot of his work, not knowing I was watching his work.
And it's not bad. I mean, he's pretty. I would say pretty successful as a television director. I think there was
television director.
Yes. Well, look again. Somewhere in Time, I am a fan of. I am a fan of Santa Claus the movie. Jaws 2, maybe not so much, but I'll still give them Somewhere in Time and Santa Claus that they aren't bad.
All right, yeah, no, they're not bad. Santa Claus the movie is one of my dad's all-time favorite Christmas movies, so I can't hate on it.
And I actually think Somewhere in Time is good. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, so maybe a rewatch would tell me otherwise, but I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, yeah, it's good. It's sappy, but it's good. I did, though, learn that he did actually contact Richard Donner and asked Richard Donner for some advice. So I did like that. Even though Donner had been let go by the god-awful producers. But yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into... Oh, let me ask you this. When was the first time you saw Supergirl?
I feel like I saw this at the drive-in back in 84, 85.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I have very distinct memories of watching it as a child. And I feel like this is the kind of movie that my parents would have taken me to see at the drive-in, because they took my sister and I to drive-ins a lot, because you could take kids to a drive-in and not worry about them being stupid in a movie theater.
Yeah.
Or if they fall asleep. I mean, drive-ins were cheap, so.
Man, I always I know I found out later in life there was a drive-in not too far from me, but I have never experienced a true drive-in.
The last time I went to a drive-in and that drive-in closed not too long after was the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern in Cars 3? No, Cars 2.
Okay. So yeah, not great movies.
Not the best closing out of a drive-in experience.
Yeah. I wish I could. We had a small little twin theater here in my town. That was one of those that we wouldn't get the movie until like a month or two after it had been released, and it was only like $1.50 to go see it. It doesn't exist anymore. I do wish, though, I remembered what was the last thing I saw there. I know of movies I saw there, but I don't know what the last one was, and I kind of wish I did.
I miss those dollar theaters.
Oh yeah,
be a Saturday afternoon. There was nothing else to do. Grab a bunch of friends and go see whatever.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Whatever garbage was left that you didn't see the first, in the first run, because you're like, I don't want to see that. Well, for $1, sure, why not?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, those movie theaters were great. I mean, cheap, literally cheap seats, and that's where the sticky floors were. I mean, it's not like these movie theaters now with the reclining seats.
Oh yeah.
The high end, like being able to eat a full meal there. Nope, you had popcorn, you had box candy.
Fairly certain the popcorn was also second run.
Yeah, it's nice and stale popcorn. Hey, you put enough butter on it though. That's all that mattered.
Pretty much.
All right. Well, getting back on for me, I remember we we had a VHS of this, but it wasn't a bought. This is where we like recorded it off of like HBO. That was how I remember seeing it for the first time. And I want to say that my dad, when he recorded it, didn't quite get the beginning of it. So a lot of that stuff that happens at Argo City at the beginning, I didn't see until later in life.
Which, quite honestly, doesn't affect the movie.
No, a lot of the first 40 minutes of the movie are really just setups, but doesn't really. Yeah, we'll get into it though. Let's, as always, let's start with our characters, and we will start with Kara Zor-El, aka Linda Lee, aka Supergirl, whatever you want to call her, played by the great and wonderful Helen Slater. She first debuted, Supergirl first debuted in Action Comics 252 in May of 1959. She was created by Otto Binder and Al Plastino, is maybe how you pronounce his last name. Binder also created Mary Marvel, very similar character, more than 10 years earlier in 1942. He worked a lot with Captain Marvel characters. He also co-created Mr. Mind and Black Adam and several other from the Captain Marvel series. And then Plastino co-created Brainiac and the Legion of Superheroes. So these guys do have quite a list when it comes to DC characters that they created.
All right, now this is where, as a not as ardent of a DC fan as you are, I have questions.
Okay.
I have always known Supergirl as Kara Zor-El, which she was in this movie, and then coming to the planet Earth as Kara Danvers.
Yes, that is post-Crisis.
Okay. And then in this movie, she was Linda Lee.
Which was her name. So when she came to Earth, Superman helped her with an identity. The identity was Linda Lee. And then she is adopted by the Danvers. So that didn't change. So her name was Linda Lee Danvers once she was adopted. Which I think they make a reference to, because I don't know if you caught, the principal of the high school is actually named Mr. Danvers.
Yeah, I caught that, yeah.
Yeah. They never give his first name, so I don't know if he's supposed to be, quote unquote, Linda's adopted father. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not even pretty sure. That's obviously a reference to her last name. But no, it was post-Crisis that when they rebooted everything that she became Kara Danvers.
Ah, okay.
Anywho, so we've got Supergirl here, played by, like I said, Helen Slater, who, like many of the actors of this time, would continue on in the Superman franchise. She would later play Kal-El's mom, Lara, on Smallville. And many people probably know this, she played Mrs. Danvers on the CW TV show Supergirl. She was Supergirl's adopted mom on Supergirl. So she is her own mother.
Yeah, no,
and aunt.
Yeah, I remember that because I watched the CW version of Supergirl, and I was like, hey, that's Supergirl.
Yeah, and of course, Mr. Danvers, played by Dean Cain, who was famously Superman in the 90s. Are you familiar with the suit that Supergirl wore in the comics around this time?
No.
With the headband?
Oh no, I'm not overly familiar with that.
All right, so I was waiting to show you this, so I'm going to show you this right now while we're recording. They almost did the actual comic accurate suit in the movie. This is a picture of Helen Slater wearing that suit.
I mean, for the 80s, that wouldn't have been that out of place. I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, they leaned into the 80s pretty heavy already. Why not just go for it?
And so for those of you that don't know, this version of Supergirl around this time in the comic book, she had this red headband. Her hair was a little bit more, I don't know what to call it, a little bit more poofed. And then the S was higher up, not more center. It was like started right underneath her neck. And then it almost attached to the cape was the way that looked. And they did attempt to do that with Helen Slater. Now I'm showing Nicholas a picture of what it looked like in the comic books.
Okay. Yeah,
So
it looks a little
so
better
you
in
can
the
see
comic
it
book
was
than it did in Helen Slater, but
yeah, it didn't look real great for that look. And so I'm kind of glad they stuck with just the traditional look where it's just a girl, I hate to say it this way, but a girl version of Superman's costume.
right.
So I was a little bit more okay with that. But now since we're talking about the costume, before we get back to Helen Slater, where did the costume come from and how did she know what it looked like?
That is one of my first notes that I have here. Why does she immediately have the costume? Like, where in the world? Like, she just like
Yeah,
as she
because
flies out of the
the
capsule, and it just
yep,
she's just wearing it.
yes, and that capsule, that escape pod, whatever you want to call it, wasn't meant for her. So you can't establish that it was put in there. She wasn't meant to be in it. Unlike Kal-El was meant to be in his ship, so it would make sense. Okay, there is a suit connected to him in some way. Although they don't explain that in Superman the movie either, where the suit actually comes from. But there's at least a little bit of logic you can put onto this. I don't understand how she gets the costume, but on top of that, how do they know about Clark and Superman?
I there were questions I had for you when we got to that section.
Yeah, but we were here, so I just had to go ahead and get into it.
Okay. All right. So Argo City in the comic books is a thing. That much I remember.
Yes, yes,
Um,
and we
that's
will talk a little bit more about that. Yeah,
yeah, that's different from the Bottle City, right?
yeah, that's Kandor. Yes,
That's yeah, it's cats. I knew I couldn't remember exactly how to say that, so Argo City had separated from Krypton before Krypton exploded. Or I'm
yes,
sorry, I should say Krypton.
Krypton. Yeah, go back and listen to our 100th episode from a couple weeks ago.
So they had separated before the explosion. Yeah, so that
Yes,
only raises more questions as to like how do you know that he is the one that went to Earth? How do you know anyone
yes,
went to Earth?
yes. But even if they knew that Jor-El had sent Kal-El, which you could say, okay, maybe they did know because they are family, so maybe there was some sort of communication. So even if, how do they know his name is Clark Kent, and how do they know that he is Superman? Like that is really where I was going. I need something, like something. If they
Yeah,
had maybe shown that while in Argo City, there's some sort of feed that comes in from Earth, because clearly Zoltar is fascinated by Earth, so he knows things about Earth because he talks about a tree and then later a horse, and so he knows things. But if we had just seen like how he knows this stuff,
yeah.
just give me a quick little thing.
Because
Again,
they
I'm always about the logic.
because they don't bother to explain it. But Argo City is in. I mean, in the Marvel universe, it's the microverse, but in this version, they
Inner
don't
space.
inner space. Okay,
Yeah.
so they didn't really explain it, but it's
No.
basically what in a
It's
different
the
not a different reality, but a different layer of
sure. Yeah, sure.
I mean,
We'll get into more of that later.
okay,
But let's go back to Supergirl. I was very curious to see what your thoughts were here. So Demi Moore and Brooke Shields both auditioned.
yeah. I mean, I don't. It's so hard to think of them at that time. I don't know if
My big thing though is, Helen Slater is not a natural blonde.
right,
So she actually had to dye her hair, especially because it had to be that blonde.
right.
But she had to dye her hair, and then of course the Linda Lee is a wig, which is the way it was in the comics. Supergirl wore a brown wig to be Linda Lee. That was that was their version of the glasses in the comics. Was she just
S-
had different color hair?
Slightly more effective than glasses, but
Yeah, but I don't know if Brooke Shields could maybe have pulled off blonde hair. I don't know if Demi Moore could have.
yeah, I mean, because
Her hair is so dark.
Demi Moore is definitely not a natural blonde either.
No.
So
But
yeah,
even if you were to dye it, I don't see Demi Moore pulling off blonde hair.
I
But of
I have a hard time remembering Demi Moore from that time period because I'm so used to Demi Moore now
yeah,
that as as not. I'm not. I don't want to say older, but I mean she is older. I mean,
Yeah,
but not. I guess more mature is the word I'm looking for, without trying to be too
yeah.
offensive.
You just have a hard time picturing the Brat Pack version of
Yeah,
Demi Moore,
right.
the About Last Night version of Demi Moore.
Yeah.
But of course, they did not go with Demi Moore or Brooke Shields because they wanted, as they did with the original Superman movie, they wanted an unknown. Which I've always said this. I'm all for getting unknown actors to play comic book characters. I did hear that Demi, or I did read. I didn't hear. I did read that Demi Moore was offered the role of Lucy, but turned it down. So she still could have been in the movie, but chose not to be. I don't know if that was because she felt bad not getting the Supergirl, and she was like, "Oh, I'm not Supergirl, I'm not in it." But yeah, didn't have the chance. Slater did sign a 3-picture deal, so they were expecting this to be a thing.
So we're still waiting for the other two Supergirl
Yeah, we're
movies.
still waiting for the other ones. I do want to point out though that she signed a $75,000 contract for that was a 3-picture deal. Christopher Reeve earned $250,000 for Superman 1 and 2. And then let's not even get into Hackman and Brando earning like 2 million. So,
I'm going to assume, much like Hackman and Brando making way more than Christopher Reeve, the cast list that you're about to go over may.
yeah, I tried to find out what Faye Dunaway made in this. I couldn't find it. But I at least wanted to pair Helen Slater to Christopher Reeve and show, man, Helen Slater really wanted this to be big for her to agree. I mean, 75,000 is big, but when 6 years earlier, the guy that plays Superman gets more than double that, uh, I mean, I know there's always the talk about the pay gap, but this just seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
I really think she deserved better. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the others. So we've got our villain, Selena, played by Academy Award winner Faye Dunaway.
Uh,
Um,
3-time nominated Academy Award
yes,
winner.
but she only won once. She
Right.
won for
Yeah.
Network. Yeah, but she had been nominated several other times. But yeah, she had won just seven years earlier for Network, and then here she is here. Um, Again, taking a paycheck would be all I would say to that. And based off her performance, that is exactly what she thought about it too.
I assume as much. I don't. That's why I'm assuming that they paid her way more than they paid Helen Slater.
Oh, it had to.
Just, I mean,
Again,
I'm guessing
75,000.
I'm guessing
Not
once you have
fair.
the title Oscar Award nominated and or winner attached to your name, the
Yeah.
price tag goes up.
I am not I do not know anything, but I think I have heard that like SAG does have a clause that when you are either nominated or a winner, your minimum actually does go to a certain number.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Faye Dunaway clearly was just either A, in it for a paycheck, but two, just was like, I'm going to camp this up as much as I possibly can. I heard she was kind of a nightmare on set, but I've heard that about
Yeah.
that with her in general. But,
Yeah, there's apparently interviews of Brenda Vaccaro, who played Bianca, talking about working with Faye Dunaway on this movie.
also an Oscar nominated actress.
Yes, there are several. In fact, since we're talking about her, she not only has been nominated for Academy Award, she is a Golden Globe winner and an Emmy winner.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, so back to Selena. I did find out that apparently, reportedly, Dolly Parton turned down this role.
Now that could have been real fun.
Yeah,
Dolly Parton.
I think I would. It would have been interesting for Dolly Parton to be a villain. That would be the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, but technically she was a villain, but I mean, it was so lame of a villain. Like I don't know if Dolly would have thought too much of it as being. But I mean, I could just see the way she would have camped it up and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I there is no Selena from the comic, so I don't know why they didn't go with an actual Supergirl villain. I thought maybe that this was supposed to be a take off of Morgan Le Fay from the King Arthur, who is a DC villain.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought maybe this was a takeoff for her. In the 70s, actually in 1970, because I'll tell you this story. In 1970, they introduced a character called Morgana, who is the daughter of Morgan Le Fay. And I will say the comic book character actually does resemble what Faye Dunaway looks like. She's got the big reddish, curly hair. And she is, of course, a sorceress, a witch, whatever you want to call it. But she was only in 1 year's worth of comics. She debuted in Wonder Woman in February of 1970, and then her last appearance was Adventure Comics 387 in September of 1970. So she wasn't much of a character for them to, I don't know, someone may have seen this character and went, let's just use the idea of this character, but we can't do the whole Morgan Le Fay because there's probably a copyright issue with that. With it
Well,
being,
and doesn't Marvel have a Morgan Le Fay or a Morgana Le Fay as well?
I'm sure they do, because when it comes to using literary characters, I'm sure there's public domain and there's loopholes in terms
Yeah,
of
I
how you're
feel
using
I
them.
feel like I've encountered a Morgan Le Fay or a Morgana Le Fay in Marvel as well.
Yeah. Now I'm saying Morgan Le Fay. I want to say in DC it's like Morgaine Le Fay, because I
Okay.
want to say there's like an I in there. But anyway, but yeah, there was our villain, which I found also very interesting, because those of you who don't know, I don't know if you know this, Nicholas, but Superman's only weakness is not kryptonite. Superman is also powerless to magic. So I don't know if there was an intention there
I
of
re-
having,
I remember that from the Jeopardy episode that we did.
yeah, I don't know if there was intention there of having Supergirl facing someone who does magic. So that way it would make sense that Supergirl wouldn't just be able to overpower her uh, and all. So I don't know. It was an interesting choice.
It was a choice.
uh, Speaking of making a choice, let's talk about 8-time Academy Award nominee Peter O'Toole playing Zoltar.
Um,
Uh,
I'm assuming this is they did it with Superman with Mr. Krypton, Marlon Brando.
yeah,
And they're like, we have to do something similar for this movie. Let's go get somebody else on the level of Marlon Brando and get
yeah.
Peter O'Toole, who
So
at
get
least
Lawrence of Arabia.
decided to have more fun with it than Marlon Brando did.
Oh yeah, no, Peter O'Toole. I will say of probably any of these big known actors we're going to talk about, he at least knew what movie he was making and committed to it. I will give him that. His stuff in the Phantom Zone is top notch acting while still being perfect for this movie.
Choices were made.
Yes, they were. Squirt.
Squirt.
Yeah. Okay. Still didn't get that.
I watched it twice in the last 2 weeks, and I don't.
Yeah. Because you want to think that he's getting drunk off of whatever that stuff he's squirting into his mouth, but then he offers it to a teenager. I didn't get it. Anyway,
there's a lot of script that got left on the cutting room floor, or was never written in the first place.
very true. Again, no Zoltar from the comics. Part of me went, maybe his name is supposed to be a reference to Zatara. I don't know, but yeah, no Zoltar from the comics. So, and again, another made up person. Moving on. I don't know who I want to talk about next. Let's talk about, let's have a little fun. Let's talk about Ethan Hart Bachner.
I knew this would be on your list for one reason
Of
and one reason
course.
only.
He's Ellis from
Boobaloo.
Die Hard. Yeah. Can you imagine that was just 4 years later? Like, just 4 years later.
And he looks so much older in Die Hard.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the facial hair makes him look, because him having the beard in Die Hard makes him look that much older. But yeah, he does.
Yeah, I put that on my notes, but I'm like, I don't have to worry about that one coming up because I know who I'm talking to. A massive Die Hard fan.
Yeah. Ellis in Die Hard. Which when you first kind of meet him in this movie, Ethan, he he plays dumb, but he also has that some of that arrogance in him. At least I read it as as a little bit of arrogance in him that I'm like, oh, okay, there's Ellis right there. That's him. But what were your thoughts on this completely random subplot of a love triangle? And I will say this, a love triangle that Selena didn't even care about to begin with.
I don't. I don't. There's so many subplots in this movie that don't go anywhere.
Yep.
That I just I don't know. Like, I mean, he fell in love with Supergirl because he was under a magic
No, he
spell.
fell in love with
Okay,
Linda.
with Linda. Well, but he
Yeah.
figured after they kissed, he figured out they were the same person.
Yeah. I want to talk about that a little bit more too later, but yeah. Uh, but the fact that when he's first seen, it is Bianca who is interested in him. Selena, I think her line was even, he's cute. Like doesn't really care until the Omega Hedron lights up, and she's thinking, oh, he has to be my prince. And what?
Yeah,
Now all of a sudden you care.
yeah. I don't know that the Omega Hedron, dodecahedron, whatever that thing is.
Yeah. Uh, we'll get into that. But yeah, we've talked about her a couple of times. Bianca, Brenda Vaccaro, who I already mentioned, multiple award nominee and winner. Kind of the comedic role that's filling in the same thing that Ned Beatty was Otis from the Superman movie. Just the funny comedic sidekick to the villain. That is all she is.
Yeah, the random roommate who that vaguely holds the same interest slash driver.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't quite understand like what their relationship really was, because you would think maybe Bianca wants to be a sorceress or a witch, but she doesn't ever seem to care to learn anything. And yeah, she really does seem like just that random roommate. But then it's just so weird that she lives with her in the haunted house ride at the carnival. Yeah, very weird. So much is weird. But so let's just go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the third of that group, Nigel, played by again another comedic legend, Peter Cook, classic comedy partner of Dudley Moore. In fact, if anyone's you're not aware of this, the original Bedazzled, not the Brendan Fraser one, but the original,
Right.
with Dudley Moore, Peter Cook is the devil in that one.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I'm aware it exists.
Yes, but as probably many of our listeners, if you know anything about pop culture, you know who Peter Cook is. You're just used to him saying marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That of course is the great comedic Peter Cook. But yeah, I don't know what he's doing in this movie. I don't know anything about why this character was written in this, because he's not funny.
Yeah, I don't know if he's supposed to be funny.
He's not.
It's such a. I mean, the whole Selena and Nigel thing is like so bizarre and random to begin with. Like they're just like hanging out by a lake, and randomly.
Which you assume that they are in a relationship, but then it more feels like she is his mentee, or he's training her in the dark arts. And then randomly he's a math teacher at the high school.
Yeah.
It's weird. There's so much weird to this.
Yes,
like
there
confusing weird, not movie weird, like script and plot weird. Let's see who else we got. Okay, we got Jimmy Olsen, Mark McClure, who is the only character that appears in all of these Superman movies. So he's the only connection, and he's really just there to serve that purpose. That is the only reason Jimmy Olsen's there, because we get introduced to Lucy Lane, Lois's younger sister, who is from the comics. She first appeared in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, number 36 in April of 1959. And just like they kind of play off in this movie, she is, or was originally in the comics, an on again, off again love interest for Jimmy Olsen. But she was a flight attendant, not a high school student in the comics, which makes a little bit more sense considering Jimmy Olsen is clearly an adult that works for the Daily Planet.
I chose not to think too deeply about that.
Yeah, we might talk about it a little bit more, but we'll move on for now. She was also created by Otto Binder, but with artist Kurt Swan. Swan had been an artist for Superman for several years at this point. Here she is played by Maureen Teefy, who some people may recognize from the movies Fame and Grease 2. So she was one of those actors that kind of popped up a lot kind of around this time, and then I don't think you really ever saw her again. But like I did say earlier, it was supposed to be Demi Moore, but Demi Moore chose to turn it down. Now, let me tell you what movie Demi Moore did at this time, and see if you've ever heard of it. Demi Moore decided not to do Supergirl, and instead filmed a movie called Blame It on Rio.
Oh, yes. Yes, I have heard of this movie.
I was not familiar with that.
I think that's the one she did with Michelle Johnson.
Couldn't tell you.
I'm aware of it.
Okay, that'll be on one of Tim's, forgotten 80s flicks.
Possibly.
I'm sure it will be. I think all there's left to talk about is Kara's parents, Zor-El and Allura, played by Simon Ward, and again, six-time Golden Globe nominee, one-time Golden Globe winner, Woody Allen counterpart, Mia Farrow, and then Simon Ward, who the only thing I knew him from was he was in the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers that Richard Lester directed. That was the only thing I knew him from.
Yeah, he didn't really ring a bell, but Mia Farrow, I was like, what? Why in the world?
Yeah. And you want to talk about, because we talked about, Brando in his role. We talked about Peter O'Toole in this role. Mia Farrow agreeing to do, 5 minutes of screen time?
Yeah, and this is not in the world where, comic book movies are where they are now, where, you could get, Glenn Close to show up in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to be associated with the MCU or a comic book movie. This is back when comic movies were still kind of looked down upon a little bit. Yeah, they weren't.
Yeah,
they weren't.
I mean, it wasn't really a thing at this. You really had Superman 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, and that was really about it. Of course, you had the TV shows, Wonder Woman, Incredible Hulk.
Right. Yeah.
But
they weren't where they are now. So for Mia Farrow to say, "Sure, I'll show up for a couple hours on set one day," there's no way she was on set for more than a day.
Oh no. No, that was like a half a day's worth of work, if anything, for her.
Maybe she was just at Pinewood for doing something else at the same time. No.
Yeah, she's filming. I don't know. I'm off on my years. I was about to say she's filming Rosemary's Baby, but that was like a whole 20 years earlier. But yeah, I don't know what in the world she was doing or why she agreed to do this at all. I really don't. Completely random. Because I don't even know if you would call it a cameo. Because like you said, the movies weren't big enough to really have cameos.
Yeah.
So,
I don't. Just another baffling thing about this movie.
Yeah, I really do not know. So that's pretty much our cast. There's really no one else to talk about. So let me go ahead and ask.
There is one.
You want to talk about Matt Frewer, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was that? All right, so first off, he shows up and he's a creep that makes just bad choices. As soon as she throws the first guy through the fence.
As soon as she picks him up by his neck. And by his chin. Yeah.
Right, and throws it. The second guy's like, I still got this. What?
Yeah. Oh, you want to play rough? She just told you she's Superman's cousin.
Right.
She is wearing a suit that y'all know who Superman is.
Right. And she threw the other guy through the fence. And then she used heat vision for the knife. And you still tried to. Yeah, that scene made little to no sense.
Yeah. Also being just even 1984, you got two truckers essentially trying to do harm to a young girl
Yeah.
because Kara's clearly supposed to be a teenager in
Right.
this. Yeah, it is a odd, weird scene. And yeah, there's Matt Frewer, soon to be Max Headroom, here in the 80s. Has he ever made a good comic book movie?
I'd have to look at his
Because
IMDb.
he was the villain in the Generation X movie.
Yeah.
And I want to say he's been in something else. Oh, he was in Watchmen. So
Okay.
he's been in a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
He had a really small part. He was Moloch, the one who the comedian,
Right. Yeah.
cries in front of. So he has been in a good movie, good comic book movie. But yeah, the great Matt Frewer. All right, so let's go ahead and ask the question. So of this cast and these characters, who do you want to see again, and who do you wish would be pulled like taffy by a giant demon monster?
I mean, I think it would have been nice to see if we had gotten a better Supergirl movie. It would have been nice to see Helen Slater get more. She did. I thought she did an admirable job given the poor script and other poor things about this movie. But like you pointed out, Nigel just serves zero purpose.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep, he's mine as well. I see no point to the Nigel character whatsoever. Like, I know that he's supposed to be used as kind of a counterpoint, I guess you would say, counterpart to Selina, but I didn't get it. Like, I didn't get the purpose. Like, him coming in with that wand that had feathers on it, that they make it sound like this is all this big powerful wand, but you have set it up not at all, and so it's just a stick with some feathers on it as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I mean, he was supposed to be her master, and then it was like the teacher or the student becomes the teacher.
Yeah.
And it didn't. I don't know. I mean,
and then when she betrays him, the thing she does is just make him dirty.
Yeah.
Like, was that supposed to be because he's all about his looks? I didn't understand that either. Like, she just makes him dirty.
He did deliver a line that was equally baffling, and it made me laugh, not because he was trying to be funny, but because of how stupid it was. Oh, the old hanging from a chain in a ceiling trick or something.
Yeah, the cage.
Yeah. A cage from, like, wait, what?
Which that was very, I will say, those cages, that was very 1960s comic book. The round cages hanging from the ceiling. That took me back to old classic kind of Silver Age comics there. No, again, I'm agree with you. I could have done without Nigel and anything to do with Nigel. I think saying Helen Slater is Supergirl, seeing more of her is kind of a cop out. So I won't say her just for that point. Obviously, she is great. I loved her, and I will talk more about how great she is in that role. But I personally would have liked Bianca to have a bigger part.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, could have cut out Nigel and made Bianca's part bigger.
Maybe, yeah. Just something. Like, I just really think she clearly was supposed to be the comic relief. But there was just so much campiness that her comedy didn't really shine as much as I think it should have. I do think one of my favorite parts of hers is when she goes to leave at the end, and then Selina throws her against the wall, and she was like, "Yeah, like I was saying, I'm gonna stay." So I got a kick out of that line.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to an 80s Flick Flashback podcast once in a while, you could miss it. Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes, VCRs, and the video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? My name is Tim Williams. I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. On each episode, I'm joined by guest co-host to discuss one of the many movies released in the 1980s. We share our first-time watch memories, our favorite scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. New episodes are released every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an excellent episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. The ad is over. Go home. Go.
All right, so let's get into some of the moving panels. We've already hit some of this, but we'll talk about things in a little bit more depth here. I do want to point this one out. So when we are first introduced to Lucy Lane, she is reading a comic book. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out which book it was.
I found out. She's reading The Incredible Hulk. Yeah, it is issue 271 of The Incredible Hulk. So I found that very funny. So Marvel Comics exist in this DC universe.
So in the DC universe, the Marvel universe is the comic books.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's very interesting because usually, in Marvel Comics still exist. They're just, people telling stories of the real life superheroes. So I find it funny. But yeah, it's actually in this comic, Hulk actually meets Rocket Raccoon in that comic. So that's why, if you notice, you do see space on some of the panels that she's looking at. But yeah, it was an Incredible Hulk comic. So go figure. But let's go ahead and talk about things that were actually connected to the comics. So first off, you have the town that this all takes place in is Midvale. That is the town that Supergirl lives in. Although in the comics, it is a suburb of Metropolis, which I don't know why they didn't do in this movie. They made it a suburb of Chicago.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't understand
that. Made no sense. Because, yeah, when you see the map, which is where they show you that it's just outside of Chicago, I was just like, what? They seriously couldn't have made a map and put Metropolis? Plus, there isn't an actual Midvale, Illinois, so it wasn't like they were even using a real map. So...
Yeah. I don't know. When she was flying around at the beginning of the movie and she flew through the city, it was clearly Chicago. I mean, I know the Chicago skyline. I live fairly close to Chicago. So, I was like, oh, that's Chicago, not New York.
Yeah. Are there a lot of waterfalls in Chicago or in Illinois?
In Illinois, there are a couple here and there. Not anywhere near Chicago. Not that I'm aware of.
Because she does fly. When they do the flight ballet at the beginning, she does fly by some... What about some big fields with horses running free?
There's more likely that than there are massive waterfalls. Just because
I'm not familiar with Illinois. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you get outside of Chicago, farm country is pretty prevalent. So, I don't know about open wild Mustang fields. That might be a little further out towards Nebraska.
A little bit more west, yeah.
A little bit more west, but yeah, that flying, it just didn't seem as natural as it did in Superman. I don't know if it was Helen Slater not having it.
See, I don't think it was Helen Slater, because I will say that when she figures out she can fly and they do the stuff over the lake, which is clearly some wire work, she is really good at it. But I think it's the effects.
Okay.
Because, and I actually have this further in my notes. Is it just me, or does this movie seem like it was made before Superman the movie in terms of its quality?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell that the budget definitely wasn't there for this one as it was for the Richard Donner one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, the green screen effects when she's flying don't seem as smooth as they did with Christopher Reeve. Not that they're great with Christopher Reeve, but that's 1978. And this is 84. Again, green screen wasn't perfected yet, but it looked worse than the 78 green screen. Then you had the thing I referenced at the end of the characters when she's getting pulled by the giant monster who clearly is not holding her at all.
Yeah.
And the way they do that effect, it just didn't. And then there's so many of the little cut edit effects, of people disappearing and then reappearing, and the classic, stop the camera, everybody stand still while we move one thing, and then let's start filming again. But then you see that slight little shift in somebody's movement or something. I don't know. Yeah, there was something about.
I mean, I will say though that the one effect that I thought was really cool was when the Shadow Beast showed up for the first time, and he was walking through what was clearly a model of a forest, but he gets to that car.
The Evil Dead moment,
Yeah,
as I think of it.
He gets to that car and the car just starts crushing.
Yeah,
like that was cool. Like
that was pretty cool.
That looked pretty cool, but the rest of it, like they were kind of wonky at times with the special effects in this one.
Although, did how she defeated that invisible monster, did that make any sense?
I mean, about as much sense as the rest of the movie made.
Because it would have been different if she grabbed the light pole, went and got it charged up, is what I'm assuming she's doing. Why it had to be hit until the top blew off, I didn't understand. It would have made more sense if she came down and then stabbed the monster with it, but she just holds it up and it shocks the monster to death.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of this movie. It's just, I don't know what's going on, what's happening. Let's see, what else? So again, Midvale, since I like to reference the first mention or appearance, I guess you could say, even though it's a town, was Adventure Comics 227 in August of 1956. And then we go to Argo City, which you and I talked about earlier. Argo City, of course, is the actual Kryptonian home of Kara, from Action Comics 252, which was the first appearance of Supergirl in May of 1959. So the way you were talking about this earlier, so I wanted to kind of give the history. The way it works in the comic is that Zor-El also is worried about the impending destruction of Krypton, and so he builds a protective dome around Argo City, which then does protect Argo City when Krypton explodes. So he created a heck of a dome, but Argo City does not get destroyed, and it is now just floating in space. Just this, I guess, meteor with a city on it covered by a dome. They decide to head to Earth. So just like Jor-El knows what's going to happen to Kal-El when he gets to Earth, Zor-El knows that, hey, when we get there, we'll have superpowers, we'll be stronger. Unfortunately, along the way, a meteor damages the dome. So I guess you could kind of look at that the same way the Omegahedron crashes through the wall and causes problems. In the comics, though, it is a radiation leak. It's the same radiation that apparently creates kryptonite, is now able to get into Argo City. Everyone is starting to fall ill and die, and that is when Zor-El and his wife send Kara to Earth. They said, well, at least maybe we can save her. There's also another connection here, and that's the inner space part. So in the comics, it's the survival zone. And what happens is when Argo City is starting to become radiated, Zor-El makes a gun, kind of like the Phantom Zone projector type thing, but it's to send people to a place called the survival zone. And he uses it on himself and his wife, but nothing happens. And so he thinks it doesn't work. So they say, well, let's at least save our daughter. They send Kara to Earth. They then later find out that it did work. It just had a delayed effect. And so the two of them are sent to the survival zone. Now, this is all, if you want to look it up, in Action Comics 309 in February of 1964. And so I think that's the connection to this inner space. They just went ahead and put the whole city in inner space instead of just her parents. But yeah, where is inner space is the question. Like, when Zoltar, he's talking about, well, that's outer space. We are inner space. But yet she and the Omegahedron come out of a lake in Midvale. So are they in the center of the Earth? Is there some sort of portal there? Because even when she travels back to it at the end of the movie, it does kind of look like she's underwater.
Yeah,
like Argo City is underwater.
I had questions. I wasn't sure because I thought she was going through space at first. And then when she went back to the lake, she was like, flying into Argo City. I'm like, wait, did she just get her capsule and then fly through space without it? Or
yeah, because that's the other thing. Because doesn't Zoltar make it clear that going through whatever that she goes through when she gets to Earth, that it could potentially kill you. And so does she return without being in the ship? And how do they explain she's surviving that?
Yeah, there a lot of questions that you're not supposed. I don't think you're supposed to watch these movies a lot, and now that we do, like,
you're not supposed to do what we are doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, but you asked where inner space was, and I have an answer to that question.
Go ahead. I think I know where this is going.
It's over on 80s Flick Flashback in an episode I just did with Tim.
Yep. It's with Martin Short and Dennis Quaid.
Yeah.
And Meg Ryan.
Yeah, we just did that.
Yeah. As soon as I heard inner space, that was where my mind went straight to as well. I was like, oh, so all this is taking place inside of Martin Short. Awesome. So yeah. Yeah, we've talked about the Omega Hedron. That's created for the movie. It's the MacGuffin. That's all that is. It is the MacGuffin of this movie. It serves no purpose other than move the plot forward. It's not from the comics. But there is the Phantom Zone, which we might have talked about when we talked about Superman 2, because that's, of course, where General Zod and his 2 are held. But this one actually gives us the Phantom. We actually see the Phantom Zone. We find out it's more than just being trapped inside of a glass diamond, that there actually is a location. And the Phantom Zone was first mentioned in the comics in Adventure Comics 283 in April of 1961, created by Robert Bernstein and George Papp. Bernstein, his claim to fame is that he actually established Aquaman's origin, and then Papp co-created Green Arrow. So they are 2 well-known legends in DC. But here we actually get to see the Phantom Zone, which to me looked like it was straight out of the Never-Ending Story. In fact, when Supergirl falls into the muck, I immediately went, "No, Artak."
Yeah, I had the exact same thought.
What were your thoughts on their depiction of the Phantom Zone?
I mean, I guess I've never given the Phantom Zone too much thought. I just know it's where they send their prisoners, the Kryptonites. Kryptonians. Wow, it is getting late. Kryptonites. Wow, it's been a long day. But yeah, so I guess I've never thought about it, but I thought you were just in the glass until but I guess once you get to the Phantom Zone, the glass breaks and you get to fall in a pile of mud. But
then Zoltar talks about how it's where all the criminals are sent, and I'm going, where are they? How big is the Phantom Zone, and how many criminals are there for us to see? Nobody else. And then the fact that you found Supergirl in apparently this vast dimension. Again, too many questions, but we'll move on. I got to talk about some of Supergirl's powers. Apparently, she can just study clothing and then create it.
It's good power.
Yeah. I mean, they did have Clark fall out the window in the Superman movie and just change his clothes into the Superman suit. So I can't say it was that far of a stretch from the way they did it in this movie, because they do have the one moment where she flies through the tube and then comes out the other end as Linda as well. I just found it so funny that she just studies a girl wearing the uniform, and then she walks past some trees and she's slowly getting the uniform on. And I'm just going, where's this uniform coming from?
Well, she also flew through her window and became Supergirl. Was Linda flew through the window and was Supergirl. They did that too. Yeah.
Nice little split screen thing that happened there. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that one. But again, like I said, they kind of did stuff like that with Christopher Reeve, so that wasn't too far-fetched. Let me see if you caught this. Whenever she used her X-ray vision, did you notice that the image was projecting out of her eyes before she saw it on the wall?
I did notice the X-ray vision was kind of weird, but not I guess I didn't think about it being projected out of her eye.
If you go back and look as the beam is coming out of her eye, you can already see the picture in the beam, which makes no sense to how X-ray vision is supposed to work.
I mean, I think you're trying to apply logic in something we've already established. I've always said there has to be some form of logic, even in movies like this. All right, let's
Is there anything else I want to talk about? I don't think there is. I really don't. Did you catch that the big like bull demon monster thing that Selena kept the Omega Hadron? Did you catch that one line that Bianca says that it's made of lead?
Oh yeah, because it keeps growing, and she's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
what is
Selena
that?"
talks about it's getting bigger, and she goes, "How's that possible? It's made of lead." So apparently, there was a scene where Supergirl, when she arrives there, she's looking for it and can't find it, and that's the explanation because it's inside something made of lead.
Ah, yes.
So yeah, yeah. I think that's pretty much it. Anything else you want to hit on that maybe I skipped over?
Maximum Overdrive breaking out halfway through the movie.
The tractor, which again, it's my logic. Like even with something so so fictional, I need logic. When Lucy is knocked unconscious inside that thing, how is she still holding on to the side of it?
I don't know. I mean, you also have the classic '80s trope of the bullies, like the two girls who just want to beat up the girls for no
Oh, you
reason.
mean Peppermint Patty and whatever her sidekick's name is, because
Yeah,
that is exactly who the two of them were.
I don't know what I mean. They're just bullies for no reason other than to be bullies. Like,
Yeah, like the two bullies off of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
yeah, basically.
Yeah. Uh, oh, while you talked about the tractor trailer, it had me think about this. What do you think about the product placement? Popeyes and A&W root beer.
I mean, there's got to be product placement because you got to pay for the movie somehow. So,
I just love this big old, just the great shot of Helen Slater standing there in her Supergirl pose right in front of Popeyes. And then, of course, Matt Frewer is wearing the A&W shirt. And then inside the high school, there are A&W vending machines.
I'm sure they weren't super thrilled about the A&W hat being on the
I'm just going to say it, the molester.
yeah. they probably were like, well, we're not paying for that.
Yeah. It's like Apple always saying you can't have a villain using an Apple product.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. So go ahead, Nicholas. What say you?
Oh, I guess I'm gonna have to go. I mean, despite everything we just said, I think I'm gonna give it a stack it.
Okay.
It's not. It's fun. It's not as rewatchable as some of the other stuff. But it's better than some of the other movies I've watched for you. It's not like so it's not one that I like. Like Virus. Like I have no intention of ever watching that movie ever again. Like
Yeah.
I was willing to buy Supergirl on digital, and I'm not mad that I own it. It might be a few years before I try to watch it again.
Yeah.
But it's I might pull it out every so often, or like if I'm talk the wife into watching an '80s movie, which she is hesitant to do. Maybe we'll get her to watch that one.
Yeah. No, I definitely could see it is definitely a fun watch. I agree with you on all the other things. I also say stack it, but I say stack it merely because of Helen Slater. I mean, Helen Slater is Supergirl. And I know we're talking about Supergirl, but I am going to really quick talk about Superman Returns is not a good movie, but Brandon Routh is a good Superman.
Agreed.
Helen Slater is a wonderful Supergirl. Helen Slater there's a reason why she then returns to play Supergirl's mom on the TV show, because she is associated as being that character, even though she only got to do it for this one movie. People who know this movie associate Helen Slater as the original Supergirl. And I think she plays it wonderfully. The way we talk about Christopher Reeve playing Clark and Superman as two different characters, Helen does that as well. I mean, Linda Lee has the innocent curiosity, a little bit of shyness that is needed. And then when she's Supergirl, she's a little bit more confident, and she does speak different. She speaks with more of an authoritative voice. So she does exactly the same thing that Reeve did, and she does it well. I did have problems with like what is her level of knowledge. She clearly knew how a typewriter works. She clearly knew how to write up a letter of recommendation and file it. She clearly knows how this thing works and that thing works, but she doesn't know what a bra is. She doesn't know what a train is. So
Our ear piercings.
yeah, or tattoos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of inconsistency with all of that, but yeah, I think again it's a fun movie. It's one of those that as much as we kind of bashed it and whatnot, I think you do it in a fun way. You know, this is almost like the Mystery Science Theater kind of thing. You could sit and watch it with a group of friends, and you could poke fun at it, and you're doing it out of enjoyment.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, not sitting there. I mean, other than the Matt Frewer scene, you're not sitting there cringing at watching it. So yeah, it's a stack it for me as well. But there you have it. We've going in chronological order of the Superman movies being released. We've now done Supergirl, and we got Quest for Peace coming up next. That'll again probably wait till next year to do that one. But there you have it. So thank you, Nicholas, for joining me for this. Hopefully you don't see this as another one of those like really bad movies that you always say I bring you on for.
No. And I do understand that most of the time I do it to myself.
I was gonna say you usually pick them, so yeah, can't really fault you for that. And I'll go ahead and put this out there. You are gonna come back in a couple of months and do Vampirella. So
and again, I did that to myself.
Yeah, you chose it, so you can't fault me for that. But thanks everybody for listening. Rate and review the show. Check out Pop Culture Roulette with Nicholas. He's got some fun stuff to listen to. And you know what? I'm probably going to get another bracket coming, and Nicholas is always ready to go for another bracket. So stay tuned for all of that. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up today. For Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.